Welcome if you've just joined us. We're about to get started in a minute or two.
Hey, by the way, it sounds like Steven's computer is frozen. And so I'm going to help him through that by phone, and then we'll be back in just a minute.
No worries at all. We can do our talking first. Keely, what should we small talk about while we wait?
Oh, yes. How is everybody today?
Where's your background from?
Oh, yeah, I guess I can introduce myself. My name's Keely. I'm a student at Princeton University. I'm one of the co-presidents of Natives at Princeton. I'm super excited here today with my co-president, Jessica Lambert, who's also one of our co-presidents for Natives at Princeton.
Yeah, I'm Jessica, as Keely said, the other co-president of NAP. I'm a junior at Princeton in the Department of Anthropology, and I have a certificate in environmental studies. And then I guess Tom can introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Tom. I'm a grad student at SPEAR in School of Public and International Affairs, and used to be coordinator of Divest Princeton, and now just hang around. Keely, can you just say where your background is from, the background of your picture?
Oh yeah, so hello everyone out there in the Zoomverse. This is my background. It's in Arizona, and it's actually taken on the Navajo Nation. I'm Navajo, and so we're really excited to be hosting this talk along with Divest Princeton, because Indigenous rights aren't always prioritized and they're not always talked about. And I think like it's interesting to know that just the intersections of how Indigenous land rights, Indigenous sovereignty kind of tie into the international legal proceedings of like court cases, as well as, you know, translating like legal jargon and these different types of systems and cultures. So we're really excited to hear what our speaker has to say today. I hope people out there watching are like thinking about the Indigenous people they know, or like things they've seen in the case. Like a lot of us are students who study environmental studies, or like what are your own, just start thinking about questions of how, like, which Indigenous people do I know? What have I heard? You know, where are those intersections of climate change and nativeness do you have questions about, as well as like how do people combat broader capitalism, imperialism, modern colonialism, just colonialism in general. So we're here and we're excited for everyone to give us questions, and for our speaker who will be here in this bit. So we're just going to kind of hang out and start thinking of those questions.
We might even, Keely, get started because we've got to do our intros first and give Stephen some time to log on. So if that works for you, we could. Yeah,
we'll get started. So welcome everyone. Today I'm Navajo, so that's how we say hello in Navajo. And Tom, should I do the land acknowledgement now, or? Okay, so we're gonna start with the land acknowledgement. Again, like Jessica and I are co-presidents of Natives at Princeton, and we think bringing the Native presence to conversations about Indigenous people is really important. And it's not always every day you can get a land acknowledgement from a Native person, but it doesn't mean land acknowledgements have to happen from a Native person. It's just about what they really mean and what they're trying to get at. So here today, even as we are scattered across the world today, we have begun to begin by acknowledging our collective residence and reliance on stolen Indigenous land. We are, at least the three of us here, are located in central New Jersey, and we live on the land of the Lenni Lenape tribe, both past, present, and future. And Varshini lives in Boston, which is the land of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts tribes. Today, we would like to take a minute for all in attendance to think about where they are and who is not there. We have to think about the Creek, to the Cherokee, to the Choctaw, to the Iroquois, to the Pueblo, to my people, the Navajo, and to the endless number of beautiful cultures that were ripped from their homelands. there is much diversity in Indian country, and it's always important to know whose side you are on. And we recognize also that acknowledgement is not enough. So we have to urge ourselves and others to confront our roles in the continued colonization of native lands and peoples, and to use our privilege and access to alleviate ongoing suffering and injustices. We have to think about our climate as well. And our climate crisis is a direct result of not following Indigenous teachings and respecting the land. And I hope we are all here in good faith to change that. Welcome. Hi, Stephen. It's good to see you. It's wonderful to have you here. Yeah, so Stephen, I'll read your bio real quick and then we'll take it from there. So Stephen Donziger is a lawyer, a writer, and a former journalist and environmental advocate, currently known for leading an unrelenting 24-year and counting legal battle against Chevron Corporation, related to its contamination of the Ecuadorian rainforest. Stephen has led a variety of international human rights, fact-finding, and advocacy projects. He served as a public defender and edited a leading text on criminal justice reform. In the Chevron Ecuador case, his Herculean tenacity is often credited with keeping the case on track for 18 years until his clients prevailed in a complex environmental trial and won a $9.5 billion damage judgment. The judgment has since been affirmed on appeal and by Ecuador's Supreme Court, and Donziger is now part of efforts to enforce that judgment across Chevron's assets and jurisdiction around the world, including Canada, Brazil, and Argentina. After winning the judgment, Stephen was the main target of campaign of retaliatory litigation by Chevron that the company admitted was designed to demonize him. To combat the efforts, Stephen and his colleagues, Chevron has deployed a team of 60 law firms and more than 2,000 lawyers and consultants at a cost conservative, like around $2 billion. Chevron Defense is considered the largest and most expensive effort in the history of the fossil fuel industry. So again, we welcome Stephen here, who has so kindly agreed to grace us with his presence.
Yeah, and then before we move into talking with Stephen, thank you so much, Keely, but Tom and I are going to do pretty short introductions of Natives at Princeton and Divest Princeton, which are the two groups that are hosting this event. So for those of you who were here earlier, I'm Jessica. I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation. Keely and I are co-presidents of Natives at Princeton. Native students have been at Princeton since its founding. Among the first were two Lenape students, Jacob Woolley in 1762 and Bartholomew Calvin in 1776. But the visibility and numbers of Native students at Princeton have always been pretty small. The group Natives at Princeton has sort of existed intermittently throughout Princeton's history, being very much dependent on like who and how many Native students were at Princeton at the time. But the group primarily serves as a social space for the Native students on campus to come together and find community and just be together and be able to support each other. And we also do a lot of work with making sure Native voices and perspectives are visible on campus. And especially we try to welcome Native students and Indigenous students from around the world. So we're really excited to be co-hosting this event with Divest Princeton to look at indigeneity on a global scale and how sort of environmental issues are very closely tied and interact with that.
Thanks, Jessica. And if you missed it before, my name's Tom. I'm involved with Divest Princeton. And I want to begin today just by acknowledging also the killing of Dante Wright. And just today we saw footage out of Chicago of the murder by police of a 13-year-old boy, Adam Toledo. And so I want to acknowledge that I don't have any answers, but I encourage people to share resources in the chat today and to support organizers wherever you are, because racial justice and climate justice must go hand in hand. So to give you some background about Divest Princeton, we started Divest in 2019 after the global climate strikes. And our aim is actually quite simple. We want Princeton to live up to its motto, to be in the service of humanity. Investing a $26 billion endowment in fossil fuel projects as we face climate crisis is not the service of humanity. And so we've organized. We've organized now the third largest petition in Princeton's history, asking people to withhold donations from Princeton until it divests. And we've brought together alumni, students, staff, and faculty to take action. We've also really tried over the last 18 months to talk about the conduct of fossil fuel companies, not just in continuing to pollute, but all of the other ways in which they've forced us to bear the costs of their conduct, and particularly Black and Brown and Indigenous communities all around the world. We are expecting a decision from the university in May this year on our proposal for divestment, and we are hosting a climate strike rally next Saturday at 1 p.m. So would love your support to make sure that the university makes the right decision, and we'll drop some links in the chat as we go. But I might now turn over to Killian just to share a very short video for some background.
What some environmentalists call the world's worst oil-related disaster.
My name is Stephen Donziger. I was there in Ecuador when indigenous groups and Amazon communities were fighting Chevron in an epic battle for justice. My first trip to Ecuador was in April of 1993. I went down with some lawyers and scientists to investigate reports that Texaco had dumped literally billions of gallons of toxic oil waste into the pristine Amazon rainforest where indigenous groups live. No one really knew what would happen as a result of the trip, but one thing that did happen is those who went on it all committed to trying to do something to address the problem and to help the people, and to hold Texaco, now Chevron, accountable for what looked like a massive human rights problem that was done deliberately. On my first trip, I was shocked by what we found. I expected to see pollution. I was shocked by the extent of it. Massive pools of oil, literally thousands of them all over the rainforest. The oil was on their clothes, it was in the air they breathed, it was in the food they ate, it was in the water that they drank. It was an apocalyptic nightmare. During the first 10 years of the case, we were fighting to have a jury trial in the United States. Texaco and Chevron did not want that. They were petrified of a jury. They were desperate to shift the case back to Ecuador, where they would continue with their impunity. The case ended up getting shifted to Ecuador. On the very first day of the trial, in October of 2003, in Ecuador, after Chevron had agreed to accept jurisdiction there, literally the first thing they did was challenge jurisdiction. They accepted jurisdiction in the United States to get it to Ecuador. Then we got there and they're like, oh, you don't have jurisdiction over us. Chevron did not want any litigation on the merits of the claims of the Ecuadorians. They wanted to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
This is all the Chevron Texaco case.
You've read all of this?
Ya leído todo usted.
They were constantly filing dozens and dozens of trial motions in like a very short period of time, like an hour, to stop the court from functioning properly.
Es un abogado corrupto de Texaco.
Señor, usted va a responder por sus palabras.
Yo estoy respondiendo, señor. Usted es un abogado corrupto.
Chevron would then file more motions to recuse the judge from the case. And that motion would then go to another judge, and it would delay the trial for 6 months.
Part of Texaco's strategy is to bankrupt us.
So Chevron has gone out of its way to avoid talking about the real issue, which is that it committed environmental crimes in Ecuador that have devastated indigenous groups, devastated farming communities, poisoned this incredibly important ecosystem that's critical to the survival of the planet for all of us. They don't want to talk about that. Why? Because it will undermine their business model. Chevron and other fossil fuel companies like to go into areas, take out the oil, get all the profits they can, and leave behind massive pollution that the public or the area communities have to pay. They report these enormous profits, but we, meaning the people, are actually subsidizing them because we're paying the cost for their pollution while they get the profits. They basically have concluded that it's cheaper to pay hundreds of lawyers to fight this than to pay the people they harmed. Because once that happens once, the chances of it happening dozens more times increase dramatically, and their whole business model gets destroyed. It is a business model based on privatizing profits and socializing costs to the most vulnerable people on the planet. This case is about challenging that, ending it, holding it accountable, which is why they are spending massive sums of money to try to destroy my life and hold me up as some sort of scalp that they can put on the walls of their homes like hunters put a moose head up. That's really what they want out of me. I am a human rights lawyer, detained in the United States of America on bogus charges to help a U.S. company evade a $10 billion environmental liability owed to the most vulnerable indigenous groups in the Amazon. And like, it's important not to get distracted by what's happening to any one individual, in this case me, because I'm in a difficult situation. It's important to understand that and to help me and to protect me and others like me. But we cannot preserve our planet for our children, for our grandchildren, for future generations, unless this work is done.
Thanks, and thank you, Stephen, for joining us. It's really nice to have you here. I guess I would start just by, first of all, acknowledging that we'll run through a couple of questions and then we'll open up for Q&A. So please drop your questions in the chat as we go. But Stephen, I know that you've been under house arrest for more than 600 days. So I wanted to start by just checking in on you. How are you going?
Thank you. Well, first of all, hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored. And congratulations to all of y'all for your great accomplishments with the Divest Princeton campaign. It's critical that that work be done across all institutions in our society that hold capital that is invested in this destructive industry. So thank you. I'm so happy we can connect tonight. And I'm happy to answer all your questions, and, moving into discussion mode quickly is, I often find, is the best way to do this. But, look, being in house arrest is not something I ever expected. It's challenging. I have a 14-year-old son and a wife, and we live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I've been here now for 600 and, I don't know, I think it's 15 days. We go every day. Killian, my colleague, helps me keep track. I think it's 615 days, almost 2 years. The important thing to understand about my situation, aside from the personal challenge, is the solidarity we feel from all the people who supported the Ecuadorians and their lawyers is what really keeps us going. I mean, we have 55 Nobel laureates have signed a statement of support demanding my release. Being with you all tonight, I've talked to other students last week at DePaul Law School and Boston College and Stanford and Yale and Harvard. I've spoken at a number of occasions. Tennessee. People are moved by this story, and they should be, because what is happening to me is an effort by this industry to weaponize the law to intimidate you, basically to scare you into not doing this work. So we're good. We're hopeful. I have a trial May 10th. I would encourage everyone to come. It's in New York, those of you who are nearby. And we can get into that in a little bit. But the lengths to which Chevron has gone to deprive me of my liberty, to silence the Ecuadorians, is something this country has never seen before. And I want to get into that. And I also want to acknowledge, as I think, Tom, is that your name? You did at the top of your intro. I mean, there's people dying on the streets of America because of police racism. Okay, indigenous peoples in America have been the victims of genocide and broken treaties and broken promises. It's difficult for me, and I want to get into why I think people need to really care about me and the people of Ecuador. But I also want to acknowledge there's a lot of people who have it much worse than me. And I want to put that out there because I'm at least in the safety of my own home. And one thing my wife, Laura, and I have vowed to do in the face of these assaults on me is to try to create happiness in the four walls of our little apartment every day, even though I'm under house arrest. And I think we're really successful at that. And I think one reason why I can speak to you tonight with a degree of calm and emotional balance is because there's so much support. And we, are dealing with it on an emotional level, on a psychological level, I think pretty effectively, which is not to say there's no downtimes. I mean, you can't see it right now, but I have a very large black claw shackled to my lower left leg that has been there ever since August 6, 2019, has never come off. I sleep with it, I eat with it, bathe with it. I'm a runner, I exercise, and you can't run with this thing. So I have an exercise bike in my house. It's, the state is on my body is probably the best way to describe it. It's alive, it talks to me. It talks to me because when the battery runs low, literally a voice comes on, like a generic Caucasian male voice is probably the best way to describe it, that says, it says battery low, recharge unit, battery low, recharge unit, and it goes on and on. And I can't tell how many times at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. It's probably when you guys are going to bed, because I know you study SAR, but like we go to bed, 11 or midnight, and it like wakes us up in the middle of the night. And I need to go get a new battery. And then it'll go again. And like, it's, and the worst part is like, you never know what night it's going to happen. So when your head hits the pillow, you don't know if it'll be that night. And it's a very destabilizing thing to have on your body, obviously. But thank you for the question. We're good, we're well, and we're going to get through this.
That's so interesting. I study anthropology, and so we're always talking about our relation to like the body and temporality and stuff. So I hadn't even thought about that. And just now that we know how you're doing, we want to know like, how are the impacted communities or like the people that you work with, like how are they doing? Have they received any like payouts? Like what exactly were the settlements of the case? And just kind of give us a rundown of just how everyone else is doing.
Well, thank you. Not well. So basically, the thumbnail sketch is the communities, hired lawyers, me among them. One of the things I did as my role on the legal team is I was able to raise the financial capital that the communities needed to like do the case. I mean, you can't just do a complex environmental case without at least some money. And we've raised money from donors and from investors, and we created an economic model behind the case that I would call capitalism in service of human rights. That might be a little naive, but we had to get capital to do the case. And basically, the communities, the indigenous groups, and it's not just indigenous groups, it's rural farming communities, and they combined forces to do the case, allowed us to, meaning the lawyers, to get people to donate or invest money in exchange for portions of their claim. So like, say you have, a right to a recovery of $1 billion. I'm just taking that number. Actually, they had a right to recovery of 10 billion, but let's just use $1 billion. And you need 10 million to do the case. So you sell X% of your claim for 10 million. And then if there's a recovery of $1 billion, that person gets the money back plus a little extra. And it was a great funding model that has allowed us to sustain this case for 27 years. Because Chevron is spending unlimited amounts of money, $2 to $3 billion, 60 law firms, 2,000 lawyers, probably the most well-staffed corporate retaliation defense in the history of the world. They have enriched so many big law firms, including like Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, Paul Weiss. These are the big firms that represent the industry. Gibson Dunn's with Chevron, Paul Weiss is with Exxon, and they're all attacking me. So they're attacking me to really attack the communities you asked about. And ultimately, they have not paid the judgment that the communities won in 2011. And rather than pay the judgment, they're paying lawyers to not pay the judgment. but they're spending massive sums on lawyers. And you're saying, why? You know, and the reason I think is because this is so threatening to them. They would rather, if the judgment's 10 billion, they'll spend 20 billion not to pay it, because they don't want other communities around the world getting the idea, the terrifying idea in the eyes of Chevron, that they can do similar cases with similar lawyers and raise money in similar ways to pay lawyers to bring forth their claims. The cancer rates in the communities are out of sight. I mean, thousands of people have died, and it happens so slowly, you know, that when you get exposed every day to toxins, you know, you don't just die overnight. It can take years until cancer manifests as cancer. I've been to this region 250 times or so, and, you know, I've lost people I knew. We've lost witnesses who testified in the trial to cancer. Rosa Moreno was a legendary nurse, like was almost single-handedly treating the affected peoples in this impacted area. And she herself died of cancer in 2017. And I grew up with Rosa on this case. I mean, I met her the first trip I was there in April of 1993. You know, so the Ecuadorian government bears some responsibility. They have not budgeted adequately for healthcare. Although ultimately it is Chevron's responsibility. Chevron will not pay the judgment that we won. They've threatened the indigenous communities with a lifetime of litigation. Literally, that's what they said. You will face a lifetime of litigation unless you drop this case. So the people are hurting. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's an environmental justice disaster. It's a corporate accountability abomination. And it's a real sad commentary on our society that an American company on the stock exchange, okay, does business with our federal government, does business with state governments and municipalities, can go to another country, deliberately dump billions of gallons of toxic waste. This was not an accident, it was deliberate. You know, accept jurisdiction in those courts for purposes of compensation for legal claims, lose a legal case, and just refuse to pay, walk away, and sort of look at the indigenous communities who have no money or virtually no money and say, come chase me around the world. You're never going to catch me. And the reality is when that happened, we did chase them. We hired lawyers in different countries, including Canada, where the Ecuadorian communities wanted a unanimous Supreme Court decision in 2015 in Canada, saying they had a right to enforce the Ecuadorian judgment in Canada against Chevron's assets. Canada is a petrostate that has $20 to $25 billion of Chevron assets in its borders, more than enough to pay the full amount of the judgment. And as we were working in Canada, and I literally was physically in Canada when this judge charged me with criminal contempt of court for refusing to turn over my computer and cell phone to Chevron. I came back to face this case. I am a man of law. I believe in the rule of law. I'm a lawyer. I mean, I've been disbarred. That's a whole other story. But I'm a lawyer who's never had a single grievance complaint of any of my clients in 28 years of law practice, not one. I am a man of integrity, and there's so many lawyers who came to my bar hearing to vouch for that. So, I mean, I don't want to sound defensive. I'm just simply saying that because, you know, Chevron's whole strategy is to make me into a criminal.
Yeah.
Criminalize me. And that's what they want to do to those who take on this industry successfully.
I would love to hear more about I know you first went to Ecuador a long time ago. Would love to hear more about the lessons you've learned about in your time there about advocating and being a good advocate for indigenous communities you didn't know maybe when you went there for the first time.
So your question is like, how did I get to know them and how did I start connecting with them and gain their confidence? And then, yeah, it's a great question. First of all, I'm a sort of a person born of privilege who was told at law school, you can do whatever you want. And I went down to Ecuador to help people. And I went initially to tell them what they needed to do. And over time, they told me what I needed to do. Okay. And the working out of that dynamic was beautiful. It's enabled me to enrich my character, my life. And, you know, we've learned from each other. But I've never forgotten one thing, which is I am a service provider to other people. Okay. I don't own the case. It's their case. It's their process of empowerment by doing the case, by winning the case. And I had to learn, as did a lot of the other American lawyers involved, that, and even the Ecuadorian lawyers, you know, from Quito, who were trained to look at the indigenous peoples as second-class citizens, frankly, because there's a ton of racism in Ecuador. We all had to grow and learn. It's been fabulous. I'm a better person for it, but you know, it's not about me. I mean, ultimately, it's about me being able to organize teams of people to fix this problem so people can live, you know, but it took a while and a lot of fits and starts and discussions, shouting matches, jokes, dinners, parties. But we, you know, the leadership now and the lawyers who've been in it all these years, I mean, this is what kills Chevron, trust me, kills them, that a Harvard law grad who had the opportunity to live a very privileged life, okay, instead, well, I believe I'm still living a very privileged life, but it didn't live like the corporate life, but instead went to Ecuador 250 times and can count as some of his closest colleagues, shamans in the rainforest, and who can take that into some of the leading financial capitals of the world, New York, Toronto, London, Paris, Brussels, and get people to hear these people, to see what they're going through and to support them. And then to recruit top lawyers in America and Canada to advance their cause. I mean, in Canada, we won the Supreme Court case with Alan Lenzner. He's like the best lawyer in Canada. Why did he represent the Ecuadorians if this case is some big fat fraud? Why did Patton Boggs, one of the best law firms in America, represent them if it's some fraud? Or John Kecker, or Ron Kuby, who's my lawyer now, Marty Garbus. I mean, some of the best lawyers in the world have been part of this team. And yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, like, it sounds like there's been a lot of steps taken against you, and like you come from this like really good background, and it's like, how did like Chevron be able to put you under house arrest, and like what steps did they take to like put you in this position? Because like you were there and you were fighting for the people and you had so many people on your side, and it's just like, how is this possible? Like, on what grounds? And I know one of the questions in the chat touches on this too. So it's just like, are the other people being put under house arrest? And it's like, is this, no, it's just why is that?
That's an important question, which I'll try to answer more succinctly. Basically, what's happening to me is illegal by any objective standard in the view of me and my lawyers. It's never happened before to anyone in America. And it's a function of really two factors. One is Chevron sued me under the racketeering statute, civil lawsuit. The US attorney refused to prosecute me. And their theory was I committed fraud in Ecuador. And their evidence was a witness from Ecuador to whom they paid $2 million and coached for 53 days to testify. And he came into court and said he was in a meeting with me in Quito, Ecuador, where I approved the bribe of a trial judge, which is totally false. There's no evidence that ever happened other than the words out of this guy's mouth. And he admitted later that he lied in his testimony. Yet the US judge, Judge Kaplan, who has a history, he was a former tobacco industry defense lawyer, worked for Philip Morris, Brown and Williamson before he became a judge. He denied me a jury. A jury never would have looked at this, you know, this guy wouldn't have been able to say word one in court if there was a jury there. But he denied me a jury. He accepted his testimony. and he found that I had obtained the judgment by fraud, even though 29 judges and the entire Supreme Courts of Ecuador and Canada have validated the judgment. So you have a weird situation where one US trial judge, based on false evidence, has tried to sort of overturn the highest court of a sovereign nation, a trial court in the US. He doesn't speak Spanish. He never looked at the evidence in Ecuador, doesn't know Ecuadorian law and procedure. Ecuador is a civil law system. We're a common law system, you know, very different legal systems. And he used that to try to destroy me. When we kept going and won the Supreme Court decision in Canada, Chevron went back to him. They couldn't handle it. And they got him to impose millions of dollars of court costs on me. They basically ordered me to pay their legal fees. You know, I'm a human rights lawyer. They're an oil company. And their lawyers charge $1,500 an hour sometimes. I mean, they are the, you know, top lawyers commercially in the country. And they demanded to see my computer and cell phone. And I appealed it. No lawyer in history has ever been ordered that I know of in America to turn over his confidential information in the middle of civil litigation. So I appealed it. And while I was on appeal, Judge Kaplan charged me criminally with not complying with the order that I was challenging on appeal. That's never happened before. So when I came back from Canada to face these charges, and by the way, he was obligated by law to take them to the US Attorney's Office in Manhattan. That's the federal prosecutor who declined to prosecute me for obvious reasons. Kaplan then appointed a private law firm named Seward and Kissel to prosecute me. Have you ever heard of that? I didn't know you could do that in America. I since learned you actually can. There's a rule in very narrow circumstances. But one thing you cannot do is use that rule to appoint a prosecutor who has a conflict of interest. And without disclosing this, we only learned this 7 months later after I was detained already. This law firm that he appointed to prosecute me, and there's a woman there who is my prosecutor, her name is Rita Glavin. They have Chevron as a client. And they have a deep financial ties to the oil and gas industry. One of their biggest clients is an entity called Oak Tree Capital. Oak Tree Capital finances deals in the oil and gas industry. And it has two of its executives on Chevron's board of directors. They're the biggest client of the firm prosecuting me. The woman prosecuting me is a partner in a firm that has income from Chevron directly. I'm being prosecuted by Chevron, guys. And when you ask, why am I in detention? That's why. It's corrupt, in my view. It's just flat out not right. And no one seems to want to stop it. I mean, you know, big picture, our federal judiciary has been largely taken over by the Federalist Society and the corporate right, you know. So, for example, my presiding judge has already locked me up for almost 2 years on a misdemeanor with a maximum sentence of 180 days. She's a leader of the Federalist Society, to which Chevron is a major donor. Judge Kaplan, who charged me, has investments in a mutual fund that has investments in Chevron. And Rita Glavin, who's prosecuting me, has this flagrant conflict of interest because her law firm has Chevron as a client. I'm just, you know what's crazy? The what's happening to me, they're almost proud of it. You know, usually you think they would try to hide it. They almost advertise it. And I think it's a power blame, a power trip, power game they're playing. Again, to intimidate people like you and others who would think about doing this.
Stephen, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what intimidation looks like or has looked like in Ecuador for the impacted communities, what Chevron has done to intimidate, if anything, people that are on the ground, on the front line.
Well, it happens on a lot of levels. I mean, one is, this is crazy. I couldn't believe it when I found this out. When a foreign oil company goes into like a Latin American country to do a deal with the government, this happened in the case of Texaco and the Ecuadorian government. As part of the contract, the government promises to use the national army, you know, funded to defend the territorial integrity of the country as a private security force for the American oil company. So you're already creating an oppositional relationship between the people, the indigenous groups, and their own army. And Chevron and Texaco use the Ecuadorian army to intimidate the indigenous groups. I mean, even during the trial, we go out in the field, they'd have army soldiers with them. The lawyers lived in an army base. They would bring these, like, not tanks, but like those heavy vehicles, like those Hummers type vehicles, to the sites of the judicial inspections of their pollution to scare the hell out of people. So that's one level. Another level is just flat out death threats. I mean, our lawyers, I'm giving you a concrete example. Alejandro Ponce de Assis is an Ecuadorian lawyer, friend of mine, in around 2006 or 7. 2 young kids, family. He has a little law office in Quito. And he went there one day and it was, someone had robbed it overnight and taken his files on the case, but left money, and it was just, again, to intimidate. Another lawyer gets a call at 5 in the morning, picks up, sleeping next to his wife. And the boy says, just checking to see if your alarm is activated. Click. Another lawyer or advocate on our team, someone tried to run her off the road in a mountainous area, kill her. These are all ways that stuff goes down to get you to give up. I mean, I don't think they want to kill people gratuitously. You know, what it is a graduated escalation of threats that they hope will work at a low level so that they won't be found out. But if you keep going like I have, it just goes up and up and up until they just nakedly just lock you up. You know, so my situation is distressing, goes well beyond me. This is the playbook that they want to use. And like, you know, you guys are in the divestment movement. I mean, first of all, Princeton needs to divest into this industry and needs to specifically divest from Chevron. And I think any investor in Chevron should divest from Chevron until I'm freed and the Ecuadorians are paid what they're owed. But of course, that wouldn't solve the problem either, right? Because they're still destroying the planet. So, you know, Princeton's got to get out of this industry. Again, I love the work you guys are doing. And, you know, I don't know if there's more questions. I don't know if I answered your question. I don't even remember it. I tend to go on and on.
You know, this is just a chat. You can really say whatever you want. So I guess on the same note, Princeton receives research funding from Exxon and BP and has cited this as an obstacle to fossil fuel divestment. And these companies have their own pending or settled cases on environmental damages around the world. How have you seen Chevron's conduct and the conduct of fossil fuel companies vary between the places like Princeton, institutions of privilege, where they position themselves as research partners, and their conduct in frontline communities, where it sounds like it's
all part of the same deplorable behavior. And I'll explain my view of that. You know, to get away with destroying indigenous communities and destroying the Amazon. I'm just using Ecuador as one example because that's what I know, but you know, this happens in Nigeria, lots of other countries. But to get away with that kind of atrocity crime, I mean, it's ecocide what they did. They just destroyed the environment to make money, knowing people would die. To get away with that, you need to do marketing. And one of the things they do in their marketing, besides the fact they have a totally deceptive advertising campaign, or they invest maybe less than 1% of their assets in renewables, and 98% of their advertising is about renewables. They're just liars, okay? And they want to affiliate with prestigious universities like Princeton and MIT and Harvard and Stanford. And I get that. And they're using your school for that marketing purpose to launder their terrible reputation and try to come out a little bit more clean. Oh, we have a deal with Princeton to explore solutions to climate change. And the professors at your school who collaborate in this marketing scheme to dupe people, I think really should be ashamed of themselves. I mean, come on. Get your research. If you really want to solve the climate problem, get your research money from clean sources and really have independence, because they really don't have academic independence when they take money from the industry. So it's a stain on Princeton, frankly. But it's all part of the same game. It's like, we're going to pollute here, and then we're going to go into the halls of Princeton and give, $20–25 million over a period of years. So we can say, what are you talking about? We have a research program at none other than Princeton. We're not bad. We're trying to solve the problem. Oh, but what happened in Ecuador? Oh, Donziger. That's the guy who committed the fraud. Well, how do you know that? 6 appellate courts have affirmed the judgment. Oh, you didn't see Judge Kaplan's decision? Oh, no. What did Judge Kaplan? Well, he's a U.S. judge, and he knows better because he's in New York, and he found Donziger committed fraud. You didn't know that? And then he said, well, wait a second. I thought that decision was based on a witness paid $2 million by Chevron. Oh, no. He came in, and Judge Kaplan himself ruled his testimony was okay. So it must have been. I mean, this is sort of the logic that they use to just forestall accountability. Because who the hell has the time, honestly, to cut through all this bullshit and figure out the truth? I mean, there's a well-known book, I forget the author, he went to GW, he's like, doubt is their product. He was talking about the tobacco industry. They don't need to win. I mean, they have the power structure on their side. They just need not to lose. So if they just create the debate, I mean, this is the climate denial debate, right? It's the, oh, we don't really know smoking causes cancer, really, And like in our case, it's like, well, we don't know what happened. Because you have a decision in Ecuador that says one thing, Kaplan says another, Donziger's in house arrest. I mean, he must have done something wrong, right? If I'm in house arrest for 2 years, I mean, I had to do something wrong. I mean, no one gets locked up without doing something wrong in America. I mean, not anyone who looks like me. So I must have done something wrong. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, the process of criminalization of advocacy it's so real, and it's fucking happening to me. And I'm watching it happen to me. And like, I do my best to stop it by talking, interviews, Twitter. We've done a great job maintaining the truth of my narrative. But there are so many people who don't have the time to pay attention to this, who probably look at my situation and say, ooh, that case, if he's locked up, it must be a rotten case. That's how criminalization works.
That's just terrible. And I can't believe just how many players there are who are all against like you. And it just speaks to how much like corruption there is in like the oil industry and stuff. And I'm so sorry. I'm just like, that is such a terrible position.
Thank you. And I want your love and sympathy if you're willing to give it. By the way, there's a website, Donziger Defense. If you haven't already, join our campaign. If you have $5, donate. We have 3,100 donors. Be a part of it. That's important. We need to show them there's a movement behind this. I'm worried about something though, which is that I don't want you all to feel demoralized by my story. Okay, I'm worried about that. I am an optimistic person, hopeful and confident in the future if we can organize your energy and the energy of others to deal with this. Okay. So, I might pay a heavy price personally, but it doesn't mean that our collective can't really advance the ball significantly. We can. And the other thing I want to say is, even though I've been locked up for almost 2 years, I've really enjoyed my work on this case. I have not enjoyed being locked up, but I'm working while I'm locked up and getting support that I never had before. And also, obviously, the communities in Ecuador getting support they never had before. So we continue to work, and I actually enjoy my work almost every minute of every day. I really do. It's interesting. I'm on phone calls. I'm speaking to people. We're strategizing. We're doing the things we need to do to keep moving against this monster that's trying to destroy us, so it's not all bad. And most cases, by the way, you don't end up locked up like me. I mean, you can be a lawyer, an advocate, you're not going to get locked up. I mean, this is very unusual.
Stephen, just to, in the interest of time, we've got 10 minutes. We'll try and get through as many of these great questions in the chat as possible. So I might double up on a couple now, and then we'll do them a bit more efficiently. So the first one is, there's a question about, has there been any coverage in major media other than Democracy Now? And there's a couple of links in the chat. Would love you to just speak to that point. And then there's another question about, do you think anything will change or the situation will change following the election of Guillermo Lasso
in Ecuador? What was the first question? I forgot.
Just a comment about in major media or mainstream media.
Yes, sorry, media. So yeah, the major media covered this story up until Judge Kaplan ruled against me, and they have just not covered it. I mean, I've been sitting here almost 2 years. I think I consider this a human rights violation. And the New York Times newsroom is, a 30-minute walk from my apartment, and they haven't come to talk to me. And we pitched them multiple times. I mean, in contrast, there was a news station from a major European country that was interviewing me this week, and they came from 4,000 miles away. So how the corporate media covers stories is always fascinating to me. But, freedom of the press in America is more complex than many people realize, but the major media have ignored the story. But on the other hand, Democracy Now! Has covered it. The independent media like The Intercept and The Nation have been all over it. I've been on a bunch of podcasts, Chapo Trap House. I was just today with another podcast called Tangentially Speaking. I'm trying to work all the spaces available to us. So I wish the media would cover it better, but we're getting out there pretty well, and on Twitter and social media as well.
And then just a question quickly on Guillermo Lasso.
So I don't really know enough at this stage, since I haven't been there in 2 years. I mean, he was not the more leftist candidate. He's a banker. At this point, though, who's president of Ecuador is really never was of any moment. I mean, this is a legal case through an independent judiciary, and right now it's out of Ecuador and it's in other countries for enforcement. So it's over in Ecuador. I mean, the community's won there.
Yeah. Also, could you talk more about the people of Chevron, or the lawyers Chevron was able to get, and the people who worked against you? Who are they? How did they even get to this point? Are they just cold-hearted professionals? The question says, do they know what they are doing is wrong, or have they convinced themselves that they are right? Morality, should that play a part in this? If it's wrong or right and stuff
That's a lot of questions in one. So I'll just try to be simple about it. I think about that a lot. What motivates them? Why do they do this? Do they sleep at night? I concluded they sleep very well at night. In their worldview, and people just justify what they do in their professional lives one way or another. The Nazis did. They slept. I mean, people can just rationalize lots of things. And in their case, I think they've convinced themselves I am a bad person. I think they know deep down, though, that I'm not what they say. I mean, I think it's like a big game, and they're excited to sell their services to an oil company to massage the law. I mean, when they Gibson Dunn firm, Randy Mastro is the lead lawyer. And by the way, he was Rudy Giuliani's deputy mayor. He has a whole history of being a pro-corporate, divisive, I would say racist, person. I mean, racist meaning practicing a practitioner of Trump style politics, basically, or Giuliani style politics. And I think he sees this as he's making a ton of money. I mean, that whole team is, and they have the judge on their side, and there's nothing I can do about it until we rise up collectively and shout loud enough to stop it. I actually believe they do lose sleep because we call them out. I don't think they like it. Look at my Twitter feed, look at my letter to the Department of Justice about their fraud. If those who follow me on Twitter, about, 5 days ago, I sent a tweet out about this guy with a link to a letter asking the DOJ to investigate the firm criminally for framing me. And like you read that letter, you're like, if we lived in a rule of law country, that would be the case. It would be an investigation of them for what they did to undermine a legitimate judgment out of Ecuador that tens of thousands of people need respected in order to live and save their cultures. That's the case. That's the racketeering, not the fake thing that I approved a bribe of a judge, which they just made up to, as part of their a real racketeering scheme to block this judgment from being paid. So they make a ton of money. They probably bought second and third homes off of our work. And they thanked me by locking me up. You know, go figure.
Steven, thank you. This is really, really fascinating. We've got only a couple minutes left. I know you're about to go live on Twitter, so I don't want to hold you up. But maybe just to finish up, there's a question about from someone who says they have family ties to Ecuador and have lived in Napo. And so they want to know, from your experience working on behalf of communities you've represented, what would you say the fight is about for the people? Clearly, Chevron and the oil industry have done a disgusting amount of damage to the people in the land. But was there a sense that this fight is about Indigenous autonomy over what they can say about how their land is used? I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Well, it's all about that, you know. I could go on. I mean, you know, everything from like the fact the indigenous groups, you know, this is their territory, and the government still maintains they have the legal right to what's beneath the soil, subsoil rights. They can sell the oil without giving any of the money to the indigenous groups. I mean, there's so many issues. And I think the way the law can be manipulated to serve corporate power at the expense of people's fundamental rights is a fascinating topic. I mean, I know Ben Franta did talk to you guys. I love his work. That's an example of an academic who is studying the history of this deception in this industry in a way that will be useful for generations to come. Okay. His professor at Stanford did the same for the tobacco industry. I forget his name. I have his book right up here. I read it. It's brilliant. So, you know, when you guys go through life and you do your work and whatever you choose to do, you can be an activist, you can be a lawyer, you can be an academic, you can work wherever you're going to work. You know, just think of ways you can advance the ball. And I just want to say this, and I say this to young people when I talk to them. You know, I've gone all in with this case. I mean, I didn't really go all in. I had other cases, and I used to have some money, and it's all gone. Chevron took it. Seek a proper balance in your life. You know, make sure you take care of your family and your financial needs first, because if you don't have that locked down, you're not going to be that effective professionally. I'm just telling you. You don't have to go all in. Like, you can have a balanced existence and accomplish a huge amount. You know, I don't regret what I did, because I never could anticipate that Judge Kaplan and Chevron would take control of our institutions to this extent and try to attack me. That was something they forgot to teach me at Harvard Law School, that could happen. Well, you know, I didn't think that could happen. I mean, I thought the worst that would happen is we'd lose the case. You know, so I am now lost some degree of control over my identity and my life. You know, we sort of like, I'm kind of in the hands of the gods to some degree, right? I mean, I don't know how this is going to turn out, and I can't totally control it. Not a great position to be in. I'm just telling you. But I'm at peace. I'm at peace. You know, you work to control what you can control, and you really can't worry about stuff you can't control. You just do the best you can every day and try to be a person of integrity and, you know, move the ball forward. So I want to end by just, again, thanking all of y'all. I have, this chat has lifted up my spirits. I feel like we have enlisted more and more people into understanding these dynamics in a way that can maybe help better the world. I salute all of you for being involved in Divest Princeton. I have actually ideas about strategies, which I never got to. But let's continue the dialogue, and I'm more than happy to answer more questions or come back. You know, people feel like they're imposing on me. Yeah, I'm super busy, but like the thing I think I love the most about what I do is talking to students. So I love talking to you guys, and I see some what appear to be either older students or professors on this call, and I or just parents or just people.
Alumni.
Okay. Thank you for getting involved and supporting these students. You know, it's important that people across the entire age of the institution engage. So I love seeing y'all too. And thanks again, everybody. I'm actually going live on Twitter now. If you want to watch more of this little discussion.
Well, we'll see you for round 2, Stephen. Thank you so much for your time. And I posted the petition there that I think links to the website as well. So thank you. Really appreciate your time and what you've shared with us. It's, yeah, keep up the good fight.
It's been my honor and pleasure, and lots of love to all you guys, and good luck with your work, and stay strong, okay?
Yeah, and we'll try and come to the courthouse in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and if you want a little, you know, there's so many people involved, you need more information or you lead up to the trial, you need just, I don't know if you have my number. I know some of y'all do. Feel free to text me or call me. I want to, you know, if you want to come to the trial, even for one day, it'll be, I promise you, it'll be a fascinating experience.
Okay, perfect. Maybe we'll share an email if that's possible in the chat if people want to reach out. But thank you, Stephen. Twitter is waiting for you, so we'll let you go.
Okay, later. Take it easy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Just as we closed, a couple of things just to note briefly. There's a Bradford seminar talk on the 26th of April that I've posted in the chat with Professor Deborah McGregor, who's Anishinaabe from Ontario, and her research looks at Indigenous knowledge systems and their various applications in diverse contexts, including environmental and water governance, environmental justice, health and environment, climate change, and Indigenous legal traditions. We'll try and send out an email with a follow-up and the Facebook link, and encourage you to come along to our protest next Saturday for Earth Day to pressure Princeton to divest from fossil fuels. And then, of course, Stephen's trial starts, I think, on the 10th of May. So would love to see you there as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming along, and have a good night.